Everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's community chat. I'm Cassie, and I'm with the ALS Association, Oregon and Southwest Washington chapter. And I'm really excited to be joined today by Dr. Bahareh Ajami and Aude Choit. And they are both joining us from Oregon Health Sciences University and are going to be sharing a little bit about the work that their lab, the Ajami lab, is doing. I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more, but just really excited that they were able to join us today, giving us a little bit of a sneak peek into some of the research and work that their lab is doing, and more that they're going to be presenting at our research symposium on November 12th in Portland. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Casey. Go ahead.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aude. So I'm a postdoc researcher in Bahareh's lab. I've started just before COVID in March 2020. Before that, I was working in Paris where I did my PhD. And that's where I started to work on ALS. My advisor in Paris I also did a postdoc in Don Scrivens' lab in San Diego working on ALS. And so she opened her new lab in Paris working on ALS. And so I did my PhD with her. And so I guess when I was looking for a postdoc, I saw that Bahareh was opening her lab. So I kind of contacted her, and she had in mind a project to work on ALS. So I guess our interest matched, and here I am.
Yes, I was lucky she joined my lab. Hi, my name is Bahareh Ajami. I am a professor at OHSU working on neurodegenerative diseases, including ALS. I did my PhD in Vancouver, Canada, and that's when I started working on ALS. And it was interesting because we were looking at immune cells in brain. And one of the models we decided to look at was the ALS model, and stop on a very interesting observation. So the past 15 years, I've been spending my life studying how brain immune cells might be contributing to this disease and how we can actually modulate them, manipulate them in order to be able to prevent the progress of the disease. So that's basically also what Ajami Lab does. We are immunologists and neuroscientists trying to understand why. So a lot of ALS research has always been focused on neurons because those are the cells that are dying. However, we strongly believe that brain immune cells might be able to actually protect these cells, might be able to avoid that damage, and we're trying to understand why they're not doing their job, and the one that are doing their job, and protect the neurons, learn lessons from them. And that's what I will be talking about November 12th.
Well, I want to just first say thank you to you both for all that you're doing, just in the field of science, but also for ALS, as we all know, and everyone who's watching. You know, there's a lot going on in the ALS research space, but there's also so far that we need to go. And every little bit counts, you know, everything from clinical trials to lab bench research and what you were all doing in your lab. So you mentioned, you know, focusing on this immune cell. I assume you're talking about the microglia. And I had to brush up on a little bit of my science, but for those who didn't get the memo ahead of time, can you talk a little bit about what microglia are? And a little bit about what you're kind of discovering about the relationship that they play with regard to the pathology of ALS.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, the microglia are the immune cells of the central nervous system. They are part of a bigger group of cells that are called macrophages. And those cells are basically our first defense when we are kicked out with like a bacteria infection or a virus infection. So they kind of have a broad reactivity to, and they're basically here to just fight and protect the body against those invaders. in the brain, those macrophages, the microglia, have like more specific roles. So they still have their immune defense role, but they are also responsible for maintaining the overall health of the brain. So during our development, where the body is developing, they are helping the connection in the body to form. And throughout our life, they are here to kind of clean around when cells are dying, and they are here to kind of maintain the network in the brain. And basically, something that we know now from several studies is that the cells, mainly mouse studies, the cells have been, those microglia have been shown to be important for the progression of the disease, not its initiation, but they are very important for how the disease is progressing. And the issue with neurons is that it's very hard to kind of modulate them because they are what we call post-mitotic, which means that they cannot regenerate easily. But the immune cells and the microglia in general, we can kind of try to play with them and try to guide them in what we want them to do. So that's I think the idea behind our project is to try to see to understand how the microglia are behaving in ALS and to try to see if we can correct that behavior so that they are actually doing what we want them to do, which is protecting the motor neurons. I don't know if you want to talk about the project a little bit.
I will. So we are, as Aude said, they are supposed to protect the brain, and something happens, and they don't. And in terms of ALS, it's interesting that it happens later in life, even people who have the mutation. And the question is why. And one of the systems in the body that during the life doesn't function well when we get older is immune system. So we're trying to learn lessons from parts that is working right, like people who live with ALS are able to use their eyes until very later. So those neurons are protected. So we're learning, we're trying to understand what the microglia around those neurons are doing that protecting them. And can we actually go back and recapitulate that in another areas to be able to protect, to stop the disease? So we believe these cells are important in this disease. It's early time, but we do believe that they are important. As Aude said, these are the cells that are not post-mitotic. We can manipulate them.
It's fascinating what you're doing. It's really interesting to me. And clearly you're both very passionate about your work and you speak with a lot of passion about it. I'm curious, how did you both get involved in this kind of work? I mean, Aude, you shared a little bit, but just in general in this field.
So for me, actually, it has been a really interesting journey. I actually didn't study science in undergrad. I studied engineering and a very like chemical engineering, designing machines for food factories. It's very like completely on a mechanical engineering side. And I did not want it to have anything to do with biomedical science, but yeah, I started doing my master's degree, and this was the early days of the biotech when just the human genome was sequenced. And the reason I did my master's in biotech was molecular biotechnology was one of the use was for alternative fuel. We are very related to chemical engineering. I'm from Iran, so we come as a country that has oil. So we were very like it was something that we were interested. So, but the first class I took in molecular biology, I was fascinated by what you could do there and completely changed field. Studied a lot of stuff that science people do, and in terms of in grad school, just I was really fascinated. Immunology was, I was in the department of immunology. I got really fascinated. And this was around 2006, 2005. Nobody really we didn't have immunotherapies. They weren't a big deal. Immunology was only about vaccines, but it was just a very fascinating field. So, but studying in the context of neurodegeneration, it's very new. And I think that's a fascinating part, to see this very fragile organ that is supposed to be protected, why it's not.
What an interesting path you've taken. Clearly you were meant to land here and be a scientist. How about you, Aude?
Well, mine is, I guess, a little bit more classic. I wanted to be a vet when I was little. So I went through biology and I changed kind of my path. So I went to the university in France, studying classes in biology. The system is a little bit different. When we want to do biology, we don't have like a bachelor, which is like a more general studies. I guess like here we are going straight away to biology. So from the first year, I studied every possible subject in biology, and I just went from year to years, and I started to get interested in biology of aging, and so I took classes in that, and then neurology, neurobiology, and so neurodegenerative disorders, and there we are. So I basically, when I was in master's, which is required in France to do a PhD, we started we had to do an internship. So I did an internship working on Alzheimer's disease and immune cells in Alzheimer's disease. And I was super interested. And so when the time was to look at some like second year of master and then PhD project, my former advisor was proposing a project on looking at the peripheral macrophages implication in ALS. So already a neuroimmunology subject. And I just started, and then I dived in ALS. And a few years later, I'm still here. So I guess I like it.
Yeah, I guess you're meant to be here too. Well, we are so lucky that you're just here in our backyard doing this important research and open to connecting in with us in the ALS community. I think, from a standpoint of someone who's not a scientist, it feels daunting, and it feels like, oh, there's so much that's happening that we don't understand. But really appreciate when folks, open up and kind of share a little bit about what's actually happening, what you're working on, and why it's important. So with that said, I know we don't have a lot of time, but do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you're kind of most excited about in terms of the future of the research that you're doing? What are you hoping for?
So I think we all are in a very exciting time in science. And I'm not saying that because we are doing it. I think we're just a very lucky generation of scientists to be in this time. The technology is helping us a lot to understand this disease a lot. This is what we're using in our lab all the time. And I think for the first time, like, we have this conversion of different skills, different tools, computation, chemistry, biology. And I think this would make a difference. I have really high hopes that this exciting time, this is going to be a really exciting time for science. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited about that. I feel this is going to help us, hopefully, to understand this disease better, to be able to find early biomarker, early diagnostic biomarker, therapeutic targets. Now we have this ability, and this is one of the technologies Aude uses in the lab, and we're talking about it, to look at millions and millions of the cells in a single cell level, just individual cells. This 10 years ago, when I was a PhD student and somebody told me, I literally was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is not gonna happen. We are very lucky now. We are very lucky. I have really high hopes for that. What are you more excited?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the personal level, it's super rewarding to work on ALS, and scientifically speaking, it's also great to be able to work on those technologies, because they are, as Bahareh said, it's just amazing what we can do right now, and what we can, like, how far we can go, and how deep we can explore what's going on. So I guess for like a scientist soul, it's kind of, it's just incredible what we can do, and being our own investigator and looking for answers. Hopefully we're really hoping that we can, find something that is going to be useful for the people living with ALS and it's going to take, again, many years, because of course I know it's very slow. It's also slow for us. It's a very slow process, but we are hoping that we can find some answers and be able to develop new drugs to help more and more patients, for sure.
Well, thank you again, both of you, for taking the time out of your busy schedules and just for doing the work that you're doing. It means a lot to, people who are living with ALS, their families, folks like us at the ALS Association, to know that there are passionate, caring people who are doing this work and are open to talking about it. So thank you for joining us today. And I hope that those who are tuning in will join us on November 12th. Dr. Bahareh Ajami will be going ahead and giving her kind of full presentation. So you'll learn a lot more about the work that they're doing, as well as hearing from some other presenters. But again, just want to thank you both and wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.